All right, coming back to our parks, I could not be more excited to share these next announcements, which are all about the next immersive lands coming to Disneyland Paris and Disneyland California Adventure.
Not only are we creating immersive lands, attractions, and character experiences around the world, we are also crafting an interconnected story to tie them all together. This collection of unique addresses, each dedicated to a different discipline, have been brought together to champion the next generation of heroes. All of you.
It seems the age of superheroes is upon us. Well, more specifically, the age of Marvel. When Nick Fury first introduced Tony Stark to the Avengers Initiative in 2008, few could have predicted just how expansive the idea would become. 12 years and 23 films later, the MCU shows no signs of slowing down, becoming what some would argue the most definitive franchise of the 2010s. Marvel has inspired the rebirth of both superheroes, and with it, the concept of a shared cinematic universe. Born out of comics and graphic novels, the idea of a shared universe hinges on the notion that independently created stories and characters can fit within a broader overarching world. Comics historian and Toontopedia creator Don Markstein is credited with first defining the term in 1970. In his accompanying article, he cites the necessary criteria needed to establish a fictional shared universe, as seen here. The main takeaway is that Markstein focused on character connections and ongoing world building in order to maintain continuity. And rather than just focus on a singular storyline, the MCU has successfully modeled the style of its source material by having its characters intersect at various points, with their individual obstacles and adventures adding to a grander overarching plot. And similar to the effect that the Harry Potter franchise had on movie culture at the time, particularly their decision to split the final book into two separate films, which then inspired every other adaptation to split their own final story in two, regardless of how necessary it actually was. The MCU has led everyone to want to jump in on that sweet Cineverse cash, which is particularly interesting since it isn't a novel concept, even in film. Long before Thanos snapped his way into our consciousness, a different set of monsters and villains helped cement the idea of a cinematic shared universe.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Starting with The Phantom of the Opera in 1925, Universal began producing a series inspired by classic horror and science fiction stories, such as Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and my personal favorite, H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man. Taking a page out of the rising medium of graphic novels, Universal's classic monster series saw their subjects in both feature solo films and eventually being paired off against each other, establishing that each film was an installment to a larger franchise. The 40s were the height of the series and brought with them the addition of the Wolfman to the lineup, as well as the first official merger in 1943's cleverly titled Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. After Wolfman's success, there was a shift in focus to feature all major monsters on screen together for the first time.
Welcome to the house!
To the house of Holbein!
Universal's run of classic monster films ended in the mid-50s with the Creature of the Black Lagoon series. But thanks to the likes of Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney Sr. and Jr., and Boris Karloff, the legacy of these films and their creatures continue to inspire new generations of monster lovers. Fans, nearly a century later. Just as the 50s saw the end to the initial monster films, it also saw the birth of Hammer Horror, so named after the British studio whom Universal had approved to reboot the monster franchise, producing over 20 films over the following 2 decades. As for Universal's own attempts to reanimate the genre, there were a couple failed installments in the mid-90s, with only the Brendan Fraser-led Mummy franchise finding success, spawning 2 sequels of its own despite it having more in common with Indiana Jones rather than the original Mummy films.
Hey, Benny!
Looks to me like you're on the wrong side of the river! Shit.
The most recent attempt has come in form of the aptly named Dark Universe, which began with Dracula Untold in 2014, and failed, and then the Tom Cruise Mummy remake in 2017, which also failed. But hey, last year's Invisible Man was pretty good, so there might be hope. And all this to say that the Dark Universe is just one of the many potential Cineverses currently in production. In fact, horror has served as one of the more prolific verse genres, with the Dark Universe, the Conjuring Universe, Alien vs. Predator, Freddy vs. Jason, and the upcoming Monsterverse, a continuation of the Godzilla, King Kong kaiju films of the 60s and 70s. Over the past decade, there's been an abundance of additions to the verse format, including already successful franchises like Harry Potter, Star Wars, and Lord of the Rings, now expanding their own worlds on both the large and small screen. In fact, shared universes are now just as common in television as they are in cinema, with everything from Cheers to The Walking Dead taking a stab at the format. And I'm not saying that the MCU is the sole cause of this rebirth, as we've seen it has lasted for quite some time. But it is interesting to note that most self-proclaimed Cineverses came post-2012, the year that Marvel's Avengers was released. Even the use of the term something universe seems to be a recent addition to the genre, again with most adopting it in the past decade or so. And with franchises this big, it's inevitable they would find their way into the theme park circle, bringing with them the shared universe style of world building, a concept that should naturally lend itself to the theme park structure, especially since some franchises have already been criticized for being too reminiscent of theme parks. Remember when this used to qualify as controversial news? I miss those days. Just as Markstein initially established his own criteria, let's quickly lay some ground rules to help hone our field of exploration going forward. Number 1. Continuity between attractions or experiences must come from the source material itself, either through character interactions and relationships or intersecting plotlines, meaning no Pixar theory to back up our claims. 2. An established universe must exist beyond the attraction's title or use of a brand. So no roller coasters with DC superhero names on them, the mere concept of Legoland, or even Pixar Pier in all its synergistic glory. 3. Attractions are connected through more than by location or proximity to one another. Avatar doesn't exist in the same universe as Dinosaur just because they're both located in Animal Kingdom. 4. The universe can transcend park boundaries and media, but must retain characters and storyline. The Pirates film and attractions do coexist within the same universe, but the Haunted Mansion film and the attraction don't, as they clearly exist in alternate realities. And the film is just, terrible. Technically speaking, though, one could argue that The Night Before Christmas and the Haunted Mansion attractions do exist in the same universe, but...
That's going a bit too far, don't you think?
Indubitably.
Number 5. Attractions that feature a retelling of a film, aka book report attractions, are not considered shared universe with said film or other iterations of that attraction. So, Peter Pan may be featured in every resort, but that doesn't mean every version is a unique part of the so-called Peter Pan universe. Now, I would like to note that this criteria is largely subjective and is by no means definitive. Also, some of these examples may fall more into the crossover territory, but due to the very nature of theme parks, the two are often conflated. Finally, the majority of our analysis will be focused on the big theme park players here, as they are where my own experience lies, and I just couldn't find enough evidence to concretely say smaller foreign parks utilize this model as well. Or, all of this to quote MST3K,
Think to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax.
to illuminate how this model works in praxis, let's begin in the far-off year of 1989. By golly, it seems another year has come and gone, and there is no better place to celebrate than the Adventurers Club. founded by that merry-making monarch of mirth, Meriwether Adam Pleasure's shrine to exploration, discovery, and drink continues to attract prospective explorers from across the globe. Why, famed aviator Hathaway Brown arrived just last week, bringing with him tall tales from exotic lands along the Nile. Or perhaps he's just practicing for the upcoming Balderdash Cup. Club President Pamelia Perkins is always on hand to greet new members or give tours of the club's treasure room. Even the Colonel seems to be in good spirits this year. Easy on the sherries, Colonel. You remember what happened last holiday jubilee? Yes, it's always a festive time at the Adventurers Club, and as they ring in 1938 with a hearty Kungaloosh, you can be sure that Eye on the Globe will be there. Pleasure Island opened in 1989, becoming Walt Disney World's first dedicated nightclub district. Hoping to emulate the success of Orlando's Church Street station, Pleasure Island offered access to multiple clubs and dance venues for one singular entry fee. Featuring classics like the Comedy Warehouse or Mannequins, a dance club that featured a rotating dance floor covered in, you guessed it, mannequins, Pleasure Island quickly found success with the young adult tourist scene. The district's main gimmick was that it was always New Year's Eve, leading to a nightly countdown and firework display. Unbeknownst to most attendees, however, was a rather intricate backstory that Disney had devised for the area. Originally owned by industrial philanthropist Meriwether Adam Pleasure, all of Pleasure Island's nightclubs were meant to be housed in Pleasure's old factories and warehouses. References to this backstory were minimal at best, with most confined to plaques that adorned each building and noted its original use. The most notable, though, was the Adventurers Club. Set in 1937 and fictionally founded by Mr. Pleasure himself, the Adventurers Club was if Trader Sam's Enchanted Tiki Bar met Whose Line Is It Anyway? Part comedy club, part theatrical performance, guests to the Adventurers Club could partake in a variety of shows, ranging in both size and scale. Live actors would host smaller improv sessions in the treasure and mass rooms respectively, as well as the larger scripted acts and sing-alongs in the library. Several featured puppets and animatronics, such as the Yakoos, and Colonel Critchlow Suchbench, the club's gleemeister who had a knack for making up rather risque drinking songs.
Drop your drawers, I'll drop mine if you drop yours. Drop your drawers down below your knee.
Rounded out the experience. The Adventurers Club quickly gained a strong cult following since the experience was always evolving, with something different taking place nightly. Long-term patrons could insert themselves within the world of the club and develop ongoing relationships with the actors and other members. Those who were lucky enough to experience the club firsthand saw just how passionate both the cast and the fans were about the concept, which made the blow that much harder when it was announced that the Adventurers Club would close in September of 2008, 19 years since its debut. Today, the Edison Club has taken over what remains of the club, with annual fan events still reuniting the cast all these years later. The reason I bring up the Adventurers Club is not just due to its tie-in to Pleasure Island's backstory, or my own personal interest in the club's history, though maybe we'll explore that more in depth in a future episode, but rather what it would in turn inspire some 2 decades later after its opening, the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. It seems not since the Disney Vacation Club has there been a better kept secret than the fictional organization of the Society of Explorers and Adventurers.
So, naturally, the whole school knows.
S.E.A. for short. Premiering in 2001 with the opening of Tokyo DisneySea, the Fortress Explorations walkthrough attraction served as a fictional home base and subsequent guest introduction for the Society. Fictionally founded in 1538 in the Mediterranean harbor of Porto Paradiso, Italy, the Society consists of explorers, scientists, artists, and adventurers from around the globe, all dedicated to the 4 founding concepts of adventure, romance, discovery, and innovation. Since its introduction, the lore of the Society has grown in both scale and interest, with decades worth of history, including several club chapters, being implemented, the most prominent being the 1800s iteration. Those members include Harrison Hightower III, a corrupt and greedy conqueror and featured antagonist in Tokyo's version of the Tower of Terror, and who suspiciously looks like a certain car-key-wearing Imagineer, Lord Henry Mystic and his pet monkey Albert, the comedic stars of Hong Kong's Mystic Manor, Barnabas T. Bullion, founder of the Big Thunder Mining Company, Mario Chenier, host of Typhoon Lagoon's Misadventure Falls waterslide, and Dr. Albert Falls of the Jungle Cruise's 8th Wonder of the World fame.
It's the backside of water!
Other generations also include Camellia Falco, whose spirit ghost painting thing hosts Tokyo's version of Soaring Around the World, dubbed Soaring Fantastic Flight. And while Tokyo may have the superior queue and pre-show, vehicles, and overall story than its American counterparts, it is sorely lacking in these little beauties.
And it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it!
Jock Lindsay, pilot to certain Antifa archaeologists, was a member in 1930s, and whose bar can be seen a stone's throw from where the Adventurers Club once existed. As you can tell, SEA's presence has spread to virtually every current Disney park, and now even extends beyond the world of attractions with references to its existence found both in comics and the cruise line. So why has SEA become so prolific? Well, this style of world building can be appreciated on several levels, without dictating each guest's individual experience. Casual parkgoers can enjoy each attraction for what they are at face value, and not feel alienated if they're not familiar with the whole storyline. While the theme park zealots, or as Disney diplomatically calls them, annual pass holders, can eat up every last bit of information like a treasure map of sorts. They can revel in both the nuanced nature of the story, APs are known for their love of continuity, and the exclusivity of merely knowing of its existence. They become part of a unique club, even if it's fictional. Secondly, SEA's shared universe is built upon broad enough concepts, romance, history, adventure, and so on, that it can easily fit within a large variety of experiences, as these themes are fairly common to both Disney and theme parks in general. Whether it's a romanticized 1930s African outpost or a Jules Verne vision of the future, SEA can be woven through both new attractions and tried and true favorites. They even retconned the Adventurers Club to fit within the SEA storyline. Think of it more like the Infinity Stones of theme parks. Often hinted at or occasionally making appearances, SEA can be placed periodically throughout various venues without overshadowing the rest of the story. Finally, and this is admittedly maybe a stretch, but SEA serves as thematically appealing with a low overall cost. In an increasingly intellectual property or IP-based entertainment world, it's rare to see such an original idea used so often. Yet, since the concept and characters have already been pre-established, it's fairly easy for Disney to adopt the SEA iconography without spending time and resources on creating new material. Take Tokyo's Tower of Terror, for instance, a pre-existing attraction and ride system that was in need of a different theme due to the Japanese audience being unfamiliar with the Twilight Zone. Enter SEA, whose mythology has already been established within the park, ensuring some familiarity with the guests, and whose theming could draw from other attractions, allowing for the always exciting synergistic opportunities. Drop in your typical demonic idol, and roll credits. By far and away, SEA is the most prominent example of a theme park shared universe today. But that doesn't mean there haven't been other attempts at the formula prior to it. Unfortunately, they usually remain trapped in a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. Join us next time as we cross into the Blue Sky Zone.
Don't everybody sing go, with which I buy my beer. Ray, the guy I buy beer from. Me, the guy I buy beer for. The distance to the store. So I think I'll have a beer. Wait for it! Wait for it! Wait for it! It's only funny if you wait for it! See, I used to la, just make it go la, and then, oh, what is the word? What should I do? I'll just go la. See, I have to explain the freaking joke. Now it's funny. La.